Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Namely and Bonusly today. Let me know if you are able to hear us through the Q&A. You should see that on the bottom of your screen. We'll be using this throughout the course of the webinar to communicate. We'll begin our content just in a few minutes. We'll start a few minutes after 3 p.m. just to let folks join after the conclusion of their previous meetings. But let us know if you're able to hear us correctly, and feel free to reach out with any questions. We'll start a few minutes after 3. All right, thank you everyone for joining, and welcome again to our webinar this afternoon, brought to you by Namely and Bonusly. Today we have two experts from both of our teams that will chat through how to recognize employees the right way. All right, now on to our agenda for the day. We'll start with an introduction of our speakers, and then our speakers will then share their expertise through Namely and Bonusly's top 10 employee recognition tips and tricks that we've reeled in from firsthand experience and customer testimonials. And then throughout the course of the webinar, please feel free, as I mentioned before, to submit questions using the Q&A widget. It seems that most of you are familiar and have started utilizing that feature. You'll find it typically at the bottom of your screen, maybe at the top as well. But we'll be monitoring throughout, and we'll conclude with a Q&A session. So any questions that do go unanswered, we'll certainly be sure to follow up when we send out that recording as well. And then finally, if you stick around until the end of the webinar, we'll also be releasing SHRM and HRCI certification codes as promised, as the webinar is worth 1 SHRM and 1 HRCI credit. But please note, you do have to stick around until the end of the webinar, as SHRM and HRCI prohibits us from releasing the code in the recording. So if you do want that credit, stick around until the end. All right, now on to our speakers. We have some awesome speakers from both sides sharing their employee recognition expertise. We have Ryan McPherson from Namely and Emily Cevolino from Bonusly, and I'll allow each of them to introduce themselves, starting with Ryan.
Awesome, thanks Amanda. So I'm really excited to be talking with you all today. As Amanda said, my name is Ryan McPherson. I'm the manager of People Ops here at Namely. I've been with the company for about 3 or 4 months now, but spent the past few years of my career as an HR partner, as well as leading our learning and development team for a cybersecurity startup based out of Boston, Massachusetts called Carbon Black, and helped that company scale from about 2 to 1,200 employees. Some of the things that I did there included building a lot of our HR programs around performance, talent recognition. So this is definitely a piece that's near and dear to my heart, and excited to talk with you all about it today. And I'll turn things over to Emily on that.
I've been involved in launching hundreds of recognition programs. Today I'll be sharing elements from what I've learned from the 3 pillars of our approach. First is the psychology side. Both our product and customer experience are based on understanding the research and psychology behind recognition programs. Second, what we've learned from the Bonusly program data after collecting data from hundreds of companies. And last but not least, we have a really consultative process with our customers both before and after they launch. So I'll be sharing some really specific ideas and examples of what's worked for our customers and what might work for you. All right, back to Amanda or Ryan.
Awesome. Now we'll get into the content. I'll pass it on to Ryan.
Perfect. All right. So obviously, you all joined the call today to answer the question and here's some kind of 10 tips and tricks around employee recognition. But why is this actually important? Why do we need to spend so much time thinking about it and making sure we have the right programs and processes in place to recognize employees? And the reality is that any acknowledgement, however small, of an employee's contribution has a significant bottom line impact to key factors that we as HR teams are responsible for. Speaking specifically to employee engagement, I know at the past couple of companies I've been with, we ran regular employee engagement surveys, and one of the greatest indicators of an employee's overall engagement was whether or not they responded positively, the statement that I feel recognized for the work that I do here. And that engagement has a direct correlation to how long an employee is going to stay, whether or not they feel valued, or whether they're going to stick around at the company. And what that recognition is also doing, it's acknowledging the positive work and their contributions to the company. So we're telling them, hey, this is the work that you contribute. So we're actually creating more productive employees when we have those high power engagement and recognition programs in place. So there's a very clear connection here to, are we telling people what they're doing right? Are they sticking around, and are they producing more for their company? So as we all as HR professionals are thinking about the importance here, these are key metrics that all of us are responsible for generally in our roles. So with that, we want to share 10 kind of top employee recognition tips. Emily and I will be trading off here, but we'll let Emily kick it off with number 1.
Thanks, Ryan. All right, I heard everyone couldn't hear me at first last time. I hope everyone can hear me now. Let me know if not. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so piggybacking off what Ryan was just talking about how recognition is showing people what they're doing well. Our first tip is recognizing employees for specific results. It's really important people know which of their contributions are valuable to their organization and why. This allows both them and their colleagues to replicate those behaviors that are valued. You can even make this more meaningful by emphasizing the impact on the team, the customer, and the business in a very specific way. So, for example, instead of saying someone is Employee of the Month, you could give them an award for delivering a really great customer experience when a particular problem came up, and talk about how that impacted the company and the team and the customer. And to make that even more meaningful, we'll go to our next tip, which is making that specific recognition visible to everyone. Basically, this will just magnify the impact out. First of all, it will be more motivating for the recipient, but it's also an excellent opportunity for other people to see the specific types of contributions that their team values and produce the same results. This is why both receiving and witnessing recognition will boost employee performance. Visible recognition is also essential for building a culture around recognition, and a great recognition program should be building a culture that emphasizes your values and promotes collaboration. And you can't build a culture in private, so the visibility is important. There's a few ways that you can work on bringing recognition into a visible place in your company. First of all, you want to put it in writing. For most modern companies, this means putting it online. Almost all of our customers have multiple offices, departments, locations, which is why both Namely and Bonusly have an online written element. For example, one of our customers wanted to make sure it was visible to their whole team. So what they did is, in addition to putting it online, they put a physical dashboard, a screen that displayed recent recognition. This just brought it into their day-to-day and made sure it was visible to everyone. The second thing you can do to make it more visible is making it social. It's kind of like with social media, because people want to chime in, they'll see it more often. And also, most accomplishments will impact more than one person, so the social aspect will allow people to add on and be more specific about what the impact was. A cool example of this is work anniversaries. So with Bonusly, we have a bot that automatically posts on people's work anniversaries. And since it's a bot, you might think it wouldn't be personal, but because it's visible and social, people chime in and add things about, if it's your 1-year anniversary, I might chime in and say, wow, you've really impacted me this year, or I can't believe it's only been a year, what you're doing is amazing. And that becomes a lot more personal. And last but not least, this is another form of making it visible, and I don't think it's, necessarily goes with the other ones. It kind of stands on its own, which is bringing it into meetings and events. So basically, I think this is a great time to do something bigger and more in depth, because to do this all the time could take a lot of time to do recognition, in every meeting or every big event for all of your employees. But for really big ones, maybe the end of the year or something really substantial, an event is a great time to recognize someone. And this all contributes to building that culture I was talking about. And because recognition is contributing to your culture, it makes our next tip especially important. And with that, I'll hand it off to Ryan.
She's spot on there. And I think what this really boils down to is being able to connect recognition to your company's values and kind of how you define your culture. So being able to recognize people who do embody your core values shows people that what the organization values and how that actually shows up on a day-to-day basis. So being able to tie that work with the values of the company allows people to see the impact of that work. And it turns a simple list of words. So what you see on the slide here are actually Namely's values. It turns that into an actual embodiment of who you are and what you're all about. And this past year, Namely actually spent some time revamping our company's mission, vision, and values. And one of the things that we did is try to tie specific recognition programs to these core values, whether that is through our online portal, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But one of the things that I found most impactful, I think it was my first week with the company, we had a company meeting, and there were 3 employees who were called out and recognized at that all hands meeting. And it was for one of these specific values. So making our clients heroes, someone who went above and beyond for our client to, provide them with the best service possible, helping each other. We heard stories of some kind of people jumping across functional lines and putting themselves out there to help teams get a project across the finish line under a tight deadline. This was such a clear indication to me of what we were walking into and what this company really valued and what was important to us. So again, it took this list of words, which maybe can feel like propaganda unless there are real behaviors behind them, and made it real and tangible and human. So, I've mentioned very quickly what we've done here at Namely, but Emily, I know there's a lot that Bonusly is doing on your side. So I'd love to hear maybe what you're seeing from some of your clients.
Absolutely. Yeah, tying recognition to values is so important. The thing is, what and who is recognized is representing what's really valued in culture, and directly influences who's going to do well and what behaviors are rewarded. So it's really important to have that alignment. The way people do this in Bonusly is with hashtags. It tends to offer a really natural way to tag recognition to values and also talk about them. And like you said, you want to reference what those core values actually mean. You can see that really easily by seeing what posts and recognition are tagged with your values. And that's what you're seeing on the left of this slide. What you see on the right is also very important. These are our analytics around what hashtags are given out. And this is exciting because the thing is, culture is always there. You just might not know what it is. And this kind of lets you define and see what's actually being recognized and rewarded and talked about in the day-to-day. And ultimately, we want to see, are your cultures part of the work employees do day in and day out? And to do that, we need to be giving recognition day in and day out. So that leads us to our next tip, which is real-time recognition. You could also call this spot or instant recognition. It goes by a lot of names, but essentially it means, not waiting for the end of the quarter to tell someone they did a good job. We do it all the time in real time. And this is becoming really increasingly common, so I'm hoping you've heard of it. And the reason it's becoming popular is because the research is showing that frequent and timely recognition has the biggest impact on engagement. And it's also driving that culture building aspect I've brought up a few times now, because it's just part of your day-to-day life. So sometimes this is paired with some time-specific things, though. So I would 100% advocate for the real time, but there's a few times where maybe you do wait for the end of the quarter. So the first one I want to mention is project-based. This is where maybe your employees just finished a project and you want to look back and recognize them for the whole thing at once. So that's not instant, it's time-based. The second one would be goal-based. So maybe the end of the quarter, end of the year, you have a goal. You want to recognize them and emphasize that goal at the end of that time period. And last but not least, I think we all know, especially now, it is the end of the year, that we're coming up on January, which is when people set New Year's resolutions. And unfortunately, sometimes that's to get a new job. So for this reason, a lot of people recognize their employees at the end of the year, just to remind them that they're appreciated and valued. So they're just a few examples. We often see people tie these together. So for example, one of our customers, CB Insights, what they do is they take all of their Bonusly recognition data and give out awards for who got the most over a year. So it's kind of a cool combination of both. And you might be wondering, okay, this sounds really cool. It's frequent and real time, but who has the time to do all of this? And that also leads us to our next tip, which is 360-degree recognition. You've probably picked up on this maybe in earlier slides as we're talking about, real-time social recognition, but it's worth having its own point because it's very important. Recognition in the modern workplace should not be just top-down. Typically, we see the best results when everyone can recognize everyone. We call this 360-degree recognition. You could also call it peer-to-peer, and you've maybe heard it called that before. I like 360 because it's inclusive of everyone. We think managers are people too. They should get recognized upward and downward, every direction, 360. In addition to encouraging collaboration with this, you're also empowering all employees to recognize each other, and that will really lead you to the other best practices. So you can see how it might make it more frequent because there's no bottlenecks. It's specific because the people closest to the work are doing the recognition, and it's more visible and social because everyone is involved. And we hear a lot that this is really important. One of our customers, LaFleur, he knew that the company was scaling quickly, and as a founder, he just wouldn't be able to keep up with recognizing everyone. And I know that's very relatable for us as well. As it gets bigger, as a company gets bigger, you just can't be the only person recognizing. And so the 360 recognition has really been essential to building a recognition-rich culture where people feel appreciated across locations and teams and departments. And this 360 recognition will also make your recognition more inclusive, which Ryan will talk a bit more about.
Awesome. And so, we've talked a lot about, the need for that spot recognition. I think with that comes, tip number 6, which is really around providing the means for people to do that on a day-to-day basis. So, we can say that we promote a culture of, constant recognition and feedback, but the reality is unless you kind of create the venues and the alleys for people to do that, often you won't see those actions coming out of it. So, to Emily's point, recognition is best when it's frequent, timely, and there's participation across the organization. So find different ways to leverage your technology to provide that means for everyday communication. One of the things we use here at Namely is our Namely feed, and you actually see a couple examples of it there on the left, where an employee can just tag another employee in a post thanking them for a job well done, again, contributing to an extra project. One of the things I see most frequently, again, is someone tying it to a specific Namely value, which again starts to put, kind of set those cultural expectations of what we value and what's important to us. And, I think there's something similar that's happening over on the Bonusly side, right, Emily?
Absolutely, that's right. Yeah, what you see on the right is our Slack integration, which is one way we bring it into the day-to-day. I want to emphasize that that's not, though it is one of the most popular, it's certainly not the only way to bring it into your day-to-day work. One of my favorite examples is Chobani. So they have office employees and warehouse employees, and they wanted it to be part of everyone's day-to-day and even start to connect the two groups of employees. So, of course, the office employees, we have lots of desktop solutions for them. For the warehouse employees, they can't actually even have phones on them because for safety concerns. So what they did is they set up an iPad where people could log in and give bonuses in the break room. And they also put up a dashboard on top of that to show recent bonuses. I think this is just a great example of looking at how your employees work and finding a way to work recognition into that. It'll look different for every company. And it's ultimately just about making it seamless with how your employees communicate and work. Yeah, in addition to making it part of the day-to-day, we really want it to be meaningful. We've talked a lot about technology solutions because really in order for all of this to work, 360, visible, frequent, it's crucial to have a technology program. But that doesn't mean technology is the only method of recognition. So our next tip is recognize online and in person. Especially for larger companies, it'll be really helpful to have a technology solution. We see in Bonusly at least 75% of employees being recognized every month. Some companies have it even like 98, 99%, which is incredible. And that wouldn't really be possible without a technology solution. It'd be like trying to have the impact of Facebook while writing letters. But that said, even in the modern world, with Facebook, we still make time for sometimes writing a handwritten note and, of course, talking to each other in person. Recognition's the same way. Following up in person really magnifies the impact. Kim Scott of Radical Candor talks about how combining in-person praise to really make the recognition feel sincere and written praise to help create a lasting artifact of the great work is a very powerful combination. So maybe an employee gives a great presentation. You want to recognize them right there in the moment, as well as give them maybe something written that is a little more in-depth and specific. Maybe you call out how much they've grown. So they're just different, but they don't even have to stand alone. You want to put it all together for something really meaningful. Great. Thanks. Tip 8 here is amplifying it by linking it to rewards. And I think this is actually the first time we're talking about rewards. And I'm glad it's here. It's very important. Rewards are what give real value to each piece of recognition. Early on at Bonusly, we wanted to know if you actually needed to tie them together. We thought maybe just recognizing each other were enough, and we could certainly save everyone some money on gift cards if it was all the same. So we ran some tests and found that we do need to tie them together. Even a small amount made a difference and showed employees that the recognition really meant something. We saw about twice the amount of recognition being given out with even just a small amount of reward enabled. So all rewards aren't created the same though. So that's why they're important. And I want to talk now about what the best practices are. The first one is make it really flexible. So we want to make sure everyone has something that works for them and that is desirable to them. Of course, if you give them rewards that no one wants, it won't really have an impact. We recommend always, having maybe gift cards as a catch-all. Someone can always find something on Amazon or Starbucks or Target that they like. It just catches everything. The second tip would be aligning it with your culture. I've seen some really great success here, aligning this with other initiatives. So maybe you have a health initiative. You want employees to be healthier. One of your rewards could be a yoga class in the office or healthy lunch, something like that. Maybe you want people to have training and continuing education. That can be a reward. So you certainly want these to be aligned with your culture and nothing that doesn't make sense. So if you have a health initiative, maybe a pizza lunch doesn't make the most sense right now if you're pushing lots of healthy eating. Third, with all of this is the biggest pitfall I see. People get really excited to set up rewards, but then get very busy and it's hard to have great admin. Running a retail store is hard work for people whose full-time job it is to run a retail store. So you have other jobs. Everyone in HR always has a lot going on. So be really realistic about what you can facilitate. And on a much less serious note, please have fun. This is my favorite point because I get to tell you some of the craziest things I've seen Bonusly people or Bonusly customers do, some of my favorites. One is a customer had a cartoonist on staff and you could redeem a reward to have a cartoon drawn of yourself. That was great fun. Kind of in the same vein, another company had a manager who had a Muppet of themselves, and you could redeem a reward for the manager to lead the training as a Muppet. And you could also, one other one, actually I have two more. Another favorite for me, this I just think is so cute, you could redeem flowers on your desk the next morning. And last but not least, ZipRecruiter made custom Zip Nikes, which I think has a great cool factor, and I was very impressed. So those are just a few ideas. Definitely have fun with it. Get creative. Find something that aligns with your values. Maybe Muppets work for you. Maybe they don't. But it's out there.
Yeah, I think I'd be more nervous about leading a team as a Muppet than I would about doing it. Point number 9 here, and I think this is where we can get in a little bit to the analytics behind some of these programs, is that it's critical to make sure that all employees are included. And, we build these recognition programs with the best intent in mind. We want to recognize employees for all the good work against our values, projects, with our customers, whatever it might mean. But the reality is it's important that we recognize some of the tendencies for how people will give these rewards and make sure that everyone is included as we go through this process. And a couple charts that you see on the slide here. So top one around recognition given by gender and recognition received by gender. And really what I want to call out here is that this like group bias that we often see, that females are more likely to give recognition to other females, just as males are more likely to give recognition to males. And when we look at that recognition received on the other side, that number even grows with our female to female population. And just as kind of a qualifier, these reports came out of a workplace diversity report that Namely published early in the year. We're calling out gender, but this also tends to fall along racial lines as well. So, many of these same dynamics are at play when we look at any demographic, whatever it might be. And, looking specifically at the bottom of the screen here, 60% of feedback to white males is given, or white individuals is provided by other white individuals. Now, to be fair, this may be more of a construct of the general balance of the workforce, but the point remains here, as we look at each of these groups, they're more likely to provide recognition to like groups, and that's similar to me, bias comes into play. So what you need to be cautious of and aware of is that you need to facilitate recognition being given across all levels, across all departments, to try to mitigate this bias. Because again, if we see that only white men are getting recognized through this program, are we implicitly telling our population that, we only value white men? And obviously that's not the intent of these programs. So it's important that we're really thoughtful about how we go about that process. And Bonusly is actually doing some really cool work to do some analytics on that front. So I'll kick things over to Emily on that.
Thanks so much. You've really nailed the importance of inclusion and recognition. And really including employees in recognition is including employees in your workplace and culture. One of my favorite stats around this is employees who are recognized in the last month are 19% more likely to agree that they fit in their organization. And it just makes sense to me. You want to feel appreciated, to feel you belong. What we do at Bonusly is we use team and department-wide analytics to ensure everyone is included. And then we can tailor a program to loop in anyone who maybe isn't being recognized now. So let's start with what it means maybe if one person isn't being recognized. For a month, it actually could be something really simple, like they were out of office. So it's important to investigate before assuming the worst. Maybe their work just isn't visible. This is something else we see. Maybe someone's on a solo project or working remote. And in this case, a manager might need to step in and be more active in recognition because their teammates aren't seeing it. Sometimes what you'll see on the chart on the left, this is a whole team maybe dipping and not being recognized as much as another team. So sometimes this is an engagement indicator, and it could mean that they're going through a tough time or aren't as engaged as another team. It could also be that the program that you've set up isn't set up for their type of work. My favorite example of this is a customer success team. So they spend most of their time talking to customers, and so they might not get as many bonuses from their peers who all their work is facing internally. So what we can do is set up in a program where, the feedback from customers is getting turned into employee recognition. So that way really everyone is being recognized for the work they're doing. And even though we aren't specifically segmenting these charts by gender, like the namely charts on the last slide, it's worth noting that, maybe your program, maybe you have some lines on teams that you want to be conscious of and make sure your programs are including, different types of work and valuing different types of work for different departments. And inclusion is just one aspect of recognition that you can track and measure. I'm going to hand it back to Ryan to talk a little bit more about measuring the success of a program.
Absolutely. So to bring it home here with tip number 10, it's important that we actually measure the success of the recognition programs that we're building. So one of the things that, speaking to what I mentioned earlier, if the intent is there to recognize employees, create that positive culture of feedback and recognition, but it's not actually doing that, then we need to understand why and where things are kind of going awry. So one of the things I always recommend is to send out pulse surveys before you launch a program, and then again, 3 to 6 months into its launch, to assess how are people feeling about being appreciated. Is this changing our engagement at all? One of the things we've done is we've just integrated some of those questions into our quarterly engagement survey that we were already doing. So you may already have the means to do that. It's just a matter of kind of adding a tweak to whatever is already existing. But then the other thing you should be taking a look at is, where's the participation? Is it high on certain teams within certain groups? And if not, what can you do as a team to promote that? Can you get the leaders to support it and start calling people out and kind of leading by example? Or do you provide an incentive for people to recognize other employees? Certainly an option as well. And then over time, as the recognition program has kind of settled in, you can start to analyze bottom line business impact. So keeping a track of turnover rates, has that gone up or down since the recognition program was implemented? And try to get feedback on your programs through exit surveys, again, through those regular pulse surveys, whatever is natural within your business. But it's important that you find different ways to track it and see, is what we are putting out there actually delivering to the business what we want it to, whether that is higher employee engagement, retention, lower turnover, higher productivity. Set those goals for yourself at the beginning and then find the means to track those. So then I'll turn things over to Emily here to recap everything we just walked through.
We made it. That was 10 tips. Great. That's a quick recap. Recognition should be specific, visible, tied to your company values, real-time, and 360-degree. Additionally, you'll want to make sure it's inclusive, integrated into your day-to-day, thoughtfully communicated, and linked to rewards. And last but not least, measure the results of your program.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to both Ryan and Emily for the awesome tips that you all provided. We do have some questions rolling in, and I just want to remind the audience, we'll get to a few of those questions now, so feel free to continue engaging with that Q&A. But I am going to give just Emily and Ryan just 2 minutes to breathe before we dig into those questions.
Thanks.
1 minute, and we'll start organizing those and answer in a second. Alrighty, so I'm gonna start with my first question. This one's for Emily. Emily, so how do you ensure everyone buys into a new program? What would you say a successful launch looks like?
That is such a good question. Thank you. I'm glad you brought it up because we have seen that a strong launch is really impactful for the long-term health and engagement with a recognition program. I think I have about 3 main tips I'm going to share. The first one, I would say reaching everyone with initial outreach in a really thoughtful way. Just like we were talking about how you want to tailor bringing it into the day-to-day because everyone's workplace isn't the same. Same thing with launching. I really think of it like marketing. You want to think about who you're trying to reach and what the best way to reach them is. We've seen a lot of creative approaches from parties to road shows to all hands meetings, posters, you name it. People make it really fun and tailor it to how their employees work. Second, I would say you want to do something that creates lasting momentum. And you want to do that, we usually do this by bringing in managers and champions. So we'll do a training, make sure everyone's excited before launch, knows how to give recognition, make sure that first day someone's willing to jump in and just start giving bonuses. And third, last but not least, make it really meaningful. I think launching a new program is an opportunity that you shouldn't miss. This is a time when leadership, someone in leadership usually, can communicate to employees, you're really important to us. We want you to know you're appreciated. The work you do every day is important. So don't miss that opportunity to say something really meaningful to employees. I think that sums it up.
That's it. And Emily, I'm actually going to ask a follow-up question there. So someone asked similarly to that. So what questions would you ask after a program has been already launched? So what would you say to a customer who maybe has implemented a program 6 months ago and they're looking to see if it's impactful or helpful? How would you tackle that?
Great question. There's quite a few things you can look at. The first thing is we usually do a before-after engagement survey, and that's not tailored just to recognition. It's kind of across the board. We use, I think, the Gallup survey, a universal engagement survey, to get the before-after. Also, some of those analytics we just talked about, you want to do a deep dive, see where the impact has been. So yeah, that's pretty much where I would look, just your analytics and getting a pulse on where your employees are. If you're not already doing a pulse survey, you can do a before-after.
Yeah, and actually, I would say I'll chime in there as well. I think for those surveys, some of the questions you can ask are, really around, do people feel like they have the avenues to provide recognition? So are people aware that they have this opportunity? And B, do they actually feel like they're being recognized or people are being recognized? So 2 super simple questions, but can really, if you ask before and after the program, can give you a really good idea of how sticky your program is and how much people are really kind of clinging on to it.
Awesome. Another good question that just rolled in. I'm going to pass this to Ryan. Ryan, so how can you use recognition to help with hiring and onboarding?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, people generally want to work somewhere where they feel like they have an opportunity to be recognized for their work, whether that's, again, being called out in a company meeting or even that small day-to-day stuff that we talked a lot about today. And I'll speak to my own experience. One of the things that I talked about with my previous company before I came to Namely was they have this really great, similar to what we do here, where we recognize employees at our all hands meetings, but it's kind of a much bigger deal where there's monetary incentives. There's, basically you get a 2-week vacation if you get what they called a company impact award. And to me, hearing from some people who had won that, it got me excited. The competitive side of me wanted to join and eventually win that. But then I think it was also that, hey, these people are really valuing their employees, and it's something that was important to them. So being able to call that out in the recruiting process, even if kind of not directly, can help give an employee a sense of what they're getting into. On the onboarding side, I think that's really your opportunity to establish a culture of recognition, because it's so much harder to change a culture than to start it right from the get-go. So if you can come in and maybe you have a day 1 or 2 onboarding process, talk about the ways you can recognize and encourage people to use that. At my previous company, we had 100 recognition points we could give out a month, and they really pushed us to use that because it was kind of a use it or lose it system. And I know right from the get-go, every single month I was sending out my 100, kind of hoping I'd get some in return. But again, it's that opportunity to establish right away from your onboarding practice and let people know that A, it's encouraged, and B, it's a great way to help you build connections and acknowledge great work at the company.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. And then another one just rolled in. I'm going to pass this to Emily. Emily, have you done studies over time on the frequency of the hashtags and posts, and if there were diminishing returns on impact to employees, things such as frequent posts becoming less special?
Yeah, I love this question because it's come up a bunch of times as we're rolling this out. People are like, well, people still think it's special to be recognized if we do recognize them all the time. So I kind of have 2 sides of it. One, on the psychology side, like a way to put it into regular day-to-day life terms would be, you probably don't get tired of hearing your friends and family appreciate you. It's great to hear that all the time. And similarly with employees, it's okay for it to be frequent. We in fact want them to feel like it's expected and that there's a foundation that they're recognized and appreciated by the company and their coworkers. So I think on the psychology side, it doesn't get worn out if you tell employees they're great all the time. And on the numbers side, we see sustained engagement in Bonusly. The last time we measured it, it was at the beginning in a year, and we haven't seen a drop when you follow the best practices that we've outlined here, which is really exciting to me. So it does become part of the culture. And I'd say there's not really diminishing returns. The research, actually, the phrase you'll hear a lot is a culture of recognition. And that's not something that's a one-time event. It's something that employees live in that engages them all the time. I hope that answers the question. Let me know if you have a follow-up on that. Happy to talk more about it and what we've seen.
And then actually, I do have a follow-up that just came through on Emily. Bruce asked hashtags. Is there a standard set of hashtags the company uses so everyone uses the same hashtag?
That's a good question. Usually people add in their core values, and you can set it so employees can also put in their own. And so what you'll see is your core values being constantly recommended by Bonusly. If you start to type a bonus, it'll recommend your hashtags. But I really like that we've seen, some spin-offs of that as well. So for example, one of ours is delight the customer. And sometimes that becomes delight the team when someone does something that helps the whole team. So, and because of that, we can kind of see, what else are employees appreciating besides our values? What's really part of our culture? So you do add in your own set, and they also might evolve a little, which is exciting to me.
Awesome. All righty. And then I'm going to loop in, there are a few questions that are a little bit related on virtual and remote employees. So I'm going to pass the bulk of those to Ryan. So let me group that question together. So someone asks, how would you launch a program when most employees are virtual? And then someone else asked, what would you do for a program where an organization where most of the employees work in various offices and on different schedules?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this becomes really almost a project management question. I think it's critical that you have representation as you're building out the program and deciding what you want to do. Go and talk to the people that this would be impacting, the people in different offices, on different teams, working those different shifts. What's important to them and what what can you do to kind of help build a program that facilitates whatever is going to be most impactful and effective for them? So if it's an entirely remote team and you don't have a portal by which people can provide that feedback online, that's going to be tough for them. And similarly, if you have a team that works very much face-to-face, they're not, maybe they're working with their hands a lot, so they're not in front of a computer screen. Acknowledging work on an online portal might not be the best fit for them. So I would recommend you go out and have some conversations, and as you're making your decisions, loop some people from the different offices and different teams into the conversation to see what would actually translate for them. And oftentimes you'll have people on those teams who are kind of culture carriers and have a really strong sense of what that team is like, what makes them tick, what's important to them. Leverage those people as much as you can, because they're also going to be your champions once the program actually rolls out. So I think it's just critical that you over-communicate, have as many conversations as you can before you roll something out. So don't just kind of run into it blind and hope that something sticks. You do your research in advance.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. And then just so you guys know, I think we have time for about 2 more questions, and then we'll be releasing that Sherman HRCI code, but keep the questions coming. Again, we'll follow up with any questions that we haven't been able to answer. But this next one, I'm going to pass over to Emily. Emily, Bruce is actually asking, how are you assessing which rewards and recognition people actually like?
Absolutely. Great question. So they're kind of 2 separate things. I will start with rewards. Rewards are simple because we can just see which ones are redeemed the most often. So that's easy. That's a quick win. As far as deciding up front what your employees will like, similar to what Ryan was talking about with your launch plan, ask them, talk to them. That's the best way to find out what they're interested in. For recognition, assuming you're doing something that's very social, we can see, how many people are commenting and adding on, and that's how we'll see which recognitions were maybe the most impactful to the whole team.
Perfect.
And yeah, I would say that's the 2 ways I would look at it.
Thanks, Emily. And then it's sorry to not give you a breath, but our final question actually goes well. Okay, so my team has yet to implement a recognition program because we simply do not have the budget. Would you be able to recommend any low-cost, out-of-the-box recognition ideas for a company that may not have the budget to go all out?
Yeah, absolutely. This is another great question because it comes up all the time. People don't have a big budget and they decide to go homegrown, and it seems like it's going to be really inexpensive. Then you're spending a ton of time on admin and manual time-consuming things, maybe running all over town getting gift cards. And suddenly it's not as impactful and taking a ton of time and resources. So I do recommend doing something out of the box, like Bonusly, like Namely, just whatever you can do to just take some of the weight off your HR team and follow all these best practices in a much easier way. Something I would say if you're having trouble finding the budget to invest in that is to look in other departments, because something you might have picked up as we were talking is that a great recognition program helps in a wide range of places. It can help with your hiring. You can get more referrals. It can help with your retention, your wellness programs. People run sales incentives through their recognition programs, boost surveys, you name it. You can run it through a recognition program. So you might be able to even get more budget than you thought in the first place if you reach out to different departments and leaders to make that investment with you. Yeah, if you can't do any program at all, my last thing would just be, try shout outs, try something. Any recognition is better than nothing, but do be careful of the scope creep of trying to design your own program.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for answering those questions that have rolled in. And again, we'll follow up any that have not been answered, but want to be mindful of that time. So before we released our SHRM code, today we've talked about some overall best practices, and we'd love to talk to you about configuring a recognition program that actually aligns with your own culture, your own company, your own goals, and share some ways that we do that at both Namely and Bonusly. So if you are interested in chatting more about either Namely or Bonusly, you should receive a poll that just came up on your screen now. Feel free to answer, and one of the members from our team will reach out. But some more information, Namely is an all-in-one HR, payroll, and benefits benefits platform created to help mid-sized companies build a better workplace. So you saw our news feed. Our news feed is used by some of the world's most innovative and exciting companies, and it's used to engage and recognize employees visibly on a daily basis, as you saw throughout the presentation. So Namely also has an awesome integration with Bonusly, our partner for the webinar, to amplify the engagement experience specifically through recognition and rewards, which I'll let Emily chat about.
Thanks so much. Bonusly is a fun and personal recognition program that enriches your company culture and improves employee engagement. Essentially, it is a one-stop shop for all of the best practices we've talked about. We make it easy to launch whether you're a small company or a large company. And I think what's really different about Bonusly is that employees love to use us.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. All righty. We are going to release that SHRM code, and you should. There we go. So the SHRM code should be on your screen. Feel free to take a screenshot there, but we'll also follow up via email as well. Thank you.